Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today it's my number 19 team in my 2026 Deep Dive Series, the New York Giants. What an offseason for the Giants, bringing in John Harbaugh as their new head coach from the Baltimore Ravens, a really high experienced head coach, hoping to be able to turn the culture around here and set up a team for franchise quarterback Jaxson Dart, see how he can improve, see how he can get things going for himself. A healthy Cam Skattebo doing backflips, eating crayons, doing the whole Scatty thing. He's looking like he's going to have one hell of a year as well. Really invested in the trenches, getting Arvell Reese with the 5th overall pick, sort of the edge linebacker hybrid, and Francis Maui Noah, the offensive lineman, going to play some guard after being a tackle at the University of Miami. Maybe a long-term tackle option for this team, but so far looking like he's going to be a guard. Is Malik Nabers going to be healthy? That seems to be the key component that drives the entire offense, because they brought in some fun pieces: Calvin Austin, Darnell Mooney, Odell Beckham Jr., Juju Smith-Schuster, but they didn't really do anything outside to bring like a true high-end talent in. On the defensive side of the ball, it's Tremaine Edmonds now as a linebacker. It's Arvell Reese there, the inside linebacker. You got Kayvon Thibodeau still, maybe not for long. You got Brian Burns. You got Abdul Carter from last year, the number 3 overall pick. You also got Colton Hood, who's being added to the cornerback room, along with Javon Holland and Tyler Nubin on the back end. Darius Washington comes over from Baltimore as well. He could be like that third safety role for them. Greg Newsome, Paulson Adebo, your outside corners. And it's not the best cover group. So we'll see what they can do with Denard Wilson running the show there. But it all does come down to the culture that John Harbaugh can set here for this coaching staff and for this overall organization that's in desperate need of the change. So brand new head coach John Harbaugh comes in as my number 10 head coach in the league. I know this is one of the most volatile gradings that you could find when it comes to people grading head coaches, is where do they put Harbaugh? Some people have Harbaugh as like a top 10 head coach, a top 7 head coach. Some of them don't even have him in the top 25. I can understand all points of view here, but what Harbaugh does is Harbaugh comes in, he's a culture setter. That's sort of what the Harbaughs do, coming from the coaching family. They set cultural standards amongst the roster. They bring in the right personnel. They're team builders. They're morale builders. And what Harbaugh was able to do in all of his years of Baltimore is he did build a consistently competitive roster. Now, you can talk about how Baltimore may be underachieved in terms of their overall success. And I think there's an argument for that, especially in recent years. But I think there's also a bit of an argument to be made that, was it John Harbaugh or was it the quarterback? Is it Lamar Jackson? I think both have arguments in being the ones to blame for that. We've seen John Harbaugh, there are questionable time management decisions made by Baltimore in certain scenarios, and we've seen questionable decision making from Lamar Jackson in some key situations as well. And Harbaugh does take on that CEO style of head coach, where he does delegate the offense and defensive responsibilities, scheming and play calling, to the coordinators. He has never been like a super micromanager. He kind of just puts all the pieces in place and then commands the big picture of what he wants the team to be throughout a season, week to week, etc. And it's worked. It has worked. Not everyone can be getting to Super Bowls every year. You got Baltimore and Kansas City. They're competing amongst each other. And, Kansas City just a little bit better. Andy Reid maybe just a little bit of a better coach. And that's the difference making right there. Patrick Mahomes, a better, more efficient quarterback. That kind of makes the difference. So I don't know that Harbaugh should be just getting piled on the way he does. I think his consistency as a coach has been phenomenal. With that said, his influence can really only go so far if he doesn't have the coordinators in place. And who he brought in was Matt Nagy to be the offensive coordinator. So they're shifting from that Kafka Daboll offense to this Matt Nagy offense, which what you're going to see is a lot of heavy pre-snap motion. So you're going to have these different players. You're going to have Isaiah Likely and Calvin Austin and Darnell Mooney, maybe Odell Beckham. You're going to see them starting on one side of the field and moving to the other. You're going to see a lot of switching of sides. You're going to see them come out with a strong right formation, shift to a spread, or shift to a strong left, or a trips left, or a trips right. And it's going to be a lot of window dressing pre-snap to just kind of give Jaxson Dart the ability to identify what exactly it is the defense is doing. And there could be a great level of complexity to this offense. It does require some high IQ from the wide receivers and the running backs, and building a lot of chemistry and understanding the coverages that you're seeing. So it takes a lot of complex studying behind the scenes when you mix in the option routes, for example. And he loves to use like a dual threat running back. And I think Cam Skattebo falls into that. He was really good in the screen game, getting out in space in the swing game, very physical runner. He does have that duality to him. And then you have, of course, Tyrone Tracy, who is the converted wide receiver from college to running back, who's had some pretty good productive years as a running back for the New York Giants the last couple seasons, and does have that receiving threat ability naturally, being a wide receiver for most of his college run. There's also a very creative screen game that Matt Nagy likes to implement, which I think plays right into the hands of guys like Calvin Austin, Skattebo, Tyrone Tracy, Isaiah Likely, Malik Nabers if he's healthy. Even Odell Beckham and Juju Smith-Schuster, who have recently signed as veterans, if they end up staying on the team. Juju, very familiar with the Nagy offense from his time in Kansas City, for example, running a very similar offense there. It's also very tight end centric. We saw Travis Kelce have some great years under Nagy and that Kansas City style offense, even coming back, even in his later years, still quite productive. And that's why you get a guy like Isaiah Likely to pair up with a Theo Johnson, because you can have a mix and match there of these athletic receiving tight ends and put them into the passing game really well. And then there's just the mixture of high percentage throws. Building some momentum for your quarterback, getting him some confidence behind the line of scrimmage. And that's what you want for Jaxson Dart. You want those high percentage throws. You want some rhythm in there. You want to work in the RPOs where it allows him to create like a triple threat dynamic on every single play. It forces the defense to sort of hold back. They have to be very disciplined on the give to the back. They have to be very disciplined on the quarterback keep and run. And they have to be equally as disciplined on the quarterback keep and throw. So when you have a dual threat like that, it's that triple, almost like a triple option, triple RPO type plays that Patrick Mahomes did really well on as well. So, and when you look at what you're getting with Jaxson Dart for Matt Nagy, what he had with Patrick Mahomes, that ability for the quarterback to tuck it and run. I think Dart much better at it than Mahomes, but the ability to have three options almost every single play does make it where the quarterback has a huge advantage, and they can create, again, high percentage throws, high percentage opportunities, and keep yourself ahead of schedule as an offense from drive to drive and play to play. There is the concerns about Matt Nagy, just because I think people see his time in Chicago as a failure. I think people saw last year in Kansas City with all the injuries that there was some regression in terms of offensive production. I think that's all fair assessments as well. And the combination of him and Harbaugh, the assessment that they could be just two guys on the way out, on the downtrend, I think that's fair. I think it's at least a fair assessment. And then what Harbaugh did on the defense side of the ball is he went and got Denard Wilson, the former Titans defensive coordinator, who was a DB's coach for the Baltimore Ravens for a while there. He comes in as a tier 3 defensive coordinator. And he's got a lot of different aspects to his game. There's going to be some of that Mike McDonald influence to some degree. You hope to see that get implemented in there. So you get the 4-3 hybrid, 3-4 nickel defensive base, where you have this like positionless defense almost as well mixing in there. That's why you have Abdul Carter and Arvell Reese, two guys who can be linebackers off ball. They can be pass rushers. You can line them up really anywhere across the line of scrimmage. Then you mix in Kayvon Thibodeau, who can kind of line up anywhere along the defensive line. Brian Burns, who's probably your straight-up edge player. It allows you to play a highly aggressive defensive style. He loves the physical, violent mindset in there. And when you have these guys who are going to just pin their ears back and go and attack the ball and attack the quarterback, it's easy for those guys to get behind that kind of style, that kind of influence. But there is a level of it being a DB-driven disguise coverage with a variety of man and zone. And Denard Wilson having that defensive background, that influence on the Giants defense, that's really going to be the key here, because the Giants, with all the great things you can say about their defensive line, even without Dexter Lawrence there, the back end was always a bit of a liability. And last year there were some injuries and there's been some good moments and some bad moments. But for the most part, what was happening was the defensive backs were giving the game away when the Giants would have those leads, and then they were just unable to sustain them as teams were able to throw the ball all over them late in games. That comes from just a lack of high quality play from your defensive backs at the end of the day. And they have some good players in the defensive back, coming back from last season, like Paulson Adebo and Drew Phillips and Javon Holland and Tyler Nubin there on the back end. And then they added Greg Newsome. They added Colton Hood in the draft in the second round. So they've made a commitment to this defensive backroom to improve on it and to keep the players that have actually had some sort of credibility in terms of their production to be given an opportunity in this style of defense that's really suited and catered towards them. Again, you'll see some press man with zone hybrids styles in there, which will helps with the disguise and when you're blitzing with a creative pass rush, how you're going to line guys up. Again, that positionless style thing where you're going to have maybe Carter, Reese, and Thibodeau on one side of the field, on one side of the center, and they're all coming. And then you might have a stunt in there with Burns where he's looping around and you're getting the free rush on the quarterback. They're going to do everything they can with the bodies that they have to have as versatile, creative, and disguised pass rush as they possibly can. And you mix in disguised coverages, it makes quarterbacks have to really be on top of their game with pre-snap identifications and understanding where their hot routes and all that are going to be, depending on where the majority of the rush is coming from. And you can do a heavy disguise there. There's also a heavy inside linebacker involvement in the pass game. Whether it be Tremaine Edmonds or Arvell Reese, who will play some off-ball backer as well with him. How those guys are used, they're going to be heavily involved in the pass game, in the pass defense, whether it be playing in the zones, locking up in man coverage, coming out on some tight ends, and chasing down running backs. And that's why you get a guy with the athleticism of a Tremaine Edmonds. That's why you have the versatility of an Arvell Reese in order to execute that defense the way that you want. So overall, it is a decent coaching staff coming into the season. There is just concern about whether or not these coordinators are the right guys. Like, these aren't these slam dunk hires that maybe people were expecting when the original rumor was Todd Monken and whatnot. And, Jim Schwartz being out there and available, people were expecting, I think, higher end hires. That just didn't happen. And I think that kind of leads to a disappointment where once you get past that, what you think you were supposed to get, and look at what you do have, I think that this is not nearly as bad of a staff, of a leadership group as people were maybe saying it was. I think the Nagy thing is a bit of a meme at this point. And Denard Wilson just doesn't have enough time and talent on his resume outside of his time with Jeffrey Simmons to really put his stamp on anything. And I think working with this group in particular, it's the most talented group he's going to have a chance to work with since becoming a defensive coordinator. So we'll see how that all kind of works out and how Harbaugh's influence over both of these guys helps create a environment where the roster can really come together and really excel. Make sure to subscribe, guys, to the channel so you don't miss any of the future videos, and you can help this channel out by growing by subscribing and thumbs upping this video, whether you agree or disagree with me at all. And now we're going to get into the player grades, starting with the quarterback position. So let's get to the quarterback here, and it's Jaxson Dart coming in as my 18th to 19th ranked quarterback. There was a lot to like about Dart's game last year. You know, he was this like gunslinging quarterback, and there was a lot of great, and then there was a lot of statistical, anomalies that sort of came out of last year with Daboll and with Kafka. He was so much better when under pressure than when he wasn't. He wants to be able to use his legs. He wants to be able to create. He wants to work outside of structure. And that's where he excelled last season as a quarterback and as a passer. And he was finding open guys late. He was putting the ball in great situations. He wasn't afraid of putting the ball deep down the field. He was 8th in big-time throws percentage. Now, did he put the ball in harm's way a bit? 27th in turnover-worthy plays. He was 25th in adjusted completion percentage. He worked the short areas really well. That's where the RPOs really came into play with Kafka calling those types of plays. Deep balls and intermediates, that's where the struggles really were, but it was the play action that didn't really work out for them last year. And I think that's really because once Skattebo went down and Nabers was out, there just wasn't a weapons group that defenses respected. So there was a lot of conservative defensive play that was happening where they were just focused on keeping Dart in the pocket and trying to get him to hang on to the ball as long as possible. And then, work the 11 plus yards down the field and keep everything in front of you type of a thing. And that ended up working out for defense, especially down the stretch of games when the defense just couldn't make a stop. The pressure faults is a huge concern. That's just a quarterback that is trying to maybe do too much too often. He was 43rd of 43 in terms of pressure fault for the quarterback. That is what we saw so much from him, was not accepting that a play may be dead and trying to do too much, extending every single play rather than just, it's first down. You don't need to scramble around and bail out of a pocket and run backwards and all that stuff. Sometimes just step up and lose as little yards as possible and come back the next play on second down and try to get back on schedule with the next play, rather than just running around, creating all this chaos, and then you're holding the ball and you're getting all this pressure and then you're taking too many hits. Because the pass blocking really wasn't all that bad. They actually did their part more times than not. It was just the lack of playmakers down the field that was making Jaxson Dart's life miserable. Outside of what he had with Wandale and from time to time Theo Johnson, there was no execution from the outside wide receivers at all. Everything was happening within the hash marks, nothing outside the numbers really, once Nabers was out. And I think that they were looking to change that with bringing in the guys like Darnell Mooney and whatnot, who we'll get to. But just from an overall perspective, his arm talent was as good as anybody's. He was putting the ball downfield, deep downfield, with strength, velocity, and accuracy. He was putting the ball into tight windows in the red zone. He was attacking certain areas. He was putting that ball, you get the man coverage, for example, from the DB or the linebacker on the tight end. You put that ball just right over top of their helmet. That's the perfect place to put the ball in the red zone. Tight end goes and gets it. Touchdown, right? Bellinger, Theo Johnson saw it a lot last season from the Giants. And it was just what doesn't appear for Jaxson Dart on the stat sheet is the impact that he has on the people around him. And say what you want about what the Giants did record-wise. Say what you want about them, quote-unquote, choking away games, which was completely mostly on the defense and the coaching strategy. Jaxson Dart did what great quarterbacks do, and that is he made everyone around him better. He made every single player on that offense a better player than what they were before he came in. When Russell Wilson was the quarterback outside of that game with Dallas, there was no one worth a crap on that Giants team. The other 10 guys. They couldn't run the ball. They couldn't pass the ball. They couldn't block. They couldn't do anything. Jaxson Dart comes in and all of a sudden, they're a great blocking team. They can run the football. They can create yards after the catch. Receivers are running open, or at least he's throwing them open a lot better. They're moving the football. They're getting key first downs and third down and longs. They're executing on fourth down. They're doing all these things. And that's a credit to what Jaxson Dart was able to do. And that's a motivator. That's somebody that the players have a lot of confidence in. And that's something that you need in a franchise quarterback. Now, how he comes back here in the second season, that's always the question around a rookie quarterback who had a dynamic start to his career. And there's a lot of aspects of his game where it just can't get worse. Like the pressure faults, for example. I would argue that his play, when kept clean, when just standing there in the pocket and playing within structure, I think Harbaugh comes in as a great influence to him. Matt Nagy comes in as a great influence to him. And I think that they're going to be able to put together an offense that really suits Dart's strengths. And I think that he has the maturity already. I think he's got the swagger mixed in with it as well to execute a really high-powered offense. It's just a matter, I think, of the weapons around him, which we're going to get to shortly, of what that looks like. Does he get his high-powered offense? Does he get his high-powered passing game with Malik Nabers? It's hard to say at this point. And his backup is Jameis Winston, who's a fun backup to have. I think that Jameis's abilities where he also likes playing outside of structure, he likes running around, maybe not the greatest influence behind the scenes, but I do think Jameis has a good IQ. I think he has good leadership skills. And I think he's kind of like one of those guys who's a great locker room guy, where guys will rally around him, rally around his message, and he'll get people to rally around Dart. He'll be able to help Dart see things that maybe he's not seeing, and maybe have an understanding of what Dart is also thinking as this player who is also like loves to extend plays, loves to get outside the pocket, have some fun with it out there. That's Jameis Winston's game, and he's going to be able to maybe get in the head of Dart a little bit to help him along the way. You got Brandon Allen, who's just your emergency quarterback at this point, but it is a quarterback class that kind of like the coaching staff, where what you feel about these two groups, the coaching staff and the quarterback position, I think really dictates where you think this team is going to finish. Now, here's the toughest eval of them all, and that is the weapons group. Now, I'm going on the assumption that come the beginning of the year, Malik Nabers will be just fine. He had his knee cleaned out, going to get back at it, and he'll be there, ready to go week 1, almost 12 months after the injury, recovered. And even if he's not back week 1, he'll be back by October. Call it by October. But it is the 15th to 21st ranked weapons group, and that comes from maybe Malik Nabers when he does play, doesn't produce at that 89 level. Maybe he's closer down to like an 85 or an 84 while he's trying to get his confidence back. I think that's pretty reasonable to assume. Because last year he just didn't have the time. Gets injured against the Chargers pretty early in that game. Outside of the game against Dallas, just wasn't able to get the ball. Russ just wasn't capable of getting him the ball, I think is more accurate. It's just a shame you didn't get to see what him and Dart would have been able to do together. Because Malik Nabers in his rookie year, man, it was a show. He put on an absolute show for people in his rookie season. And his ability to run routes, his speed out of his routes and out of his cuts, his hands, his athletic ability, that spectacular catch, as they call it, ability to go up, rise above, get the feet down in bounds, make the tough catches, be such a reliable, true number 1 alpha wide receiver. it was that type of season that really put Marvin Harrison Jr. to shame. That really puts Rome Odunze in the shadows. I don't think without Malik Nabers, people would probably have higher opinions of both of those guys. But the injuries at Death Life Stadium, it's brutal. And the knee is a giant concern. You see him kind of hobbling around, in public at some of these events. And yeah, there's a lot of, he just had surgery. Let him get some rehab done. Let him get with these top rehab guys. And the lack of them making a big play at the wide receiver position, to me, was a sign that they have all the confidence in the world that he's going to be fine, at the very least early in the season, ready to go. Overall, he's a great threat all over the field, no matter where you line him up. You line him up in the slot, he's going to be able to hit those deep drags. He's going to be run some mesh out there. If you're going to run some floods, he's going to get out there. He's going to get in his break properly. He can beat any type of corner that there is out there. He can out-jump double coverage. He can play in the red zone. He's a complete wide receiver one when he's healthy. Just needs to get healthy. What you got going on next to him, if he's not playing, then this is one of the worst weapons groups in the entire league. Because really the next one's up, you got Calvin Austin, who's going to be your little slot guy. He's pretty much stepping in as the Wan'Dale Robinson replacement, which it's kind of weird they didn't want to bring him back with how great the chemistry was with him and Dart. But it's a matter of them not wanting to pay a big price that Tennessee played. Then they brought in Darnell Mooney, another sort of outside wide receiver, maybe can play a bigger slot role, taller slot role, just to mix in there as another variety of a weapon. Then bringing in Odell Beckham Jr. and Juju Smith-Schuster. The Odell one is just fun at this point. If he makes the team, he can be a threat maybe. Another guy with that swagger. I think he fits in really well with the culture that the Giants have built here with Dart and Skattebo. Braxton Berrios probably going to be like a special teams guy, him and Calvin Austin for you, along with Deonte Banks, who we'll unfortunately get to later on. But it's Darius Slayton who's really taking on that number 2 outside wide receiver role, and with Nabers out, needs to be that wide receiver 1. And I'm one of those Giants fans that has just never really seen it in Darius Slayton. I've thought that at times he was good and times he can be a wide receiver too, but what he did last year, while on an offense that was just so fun and just so dynamic and just so aggressive, he did absolutely nothing except hold them back. Out of 97 wide receivers, he was 90th in drops percentage, 91st in contested catch percentage. He was, out of 106 eligible wide receivers, he was graded 103rd on deep balls. And if you don't know anything about Darius Slayton's game, his entire selling point is that he's a deep threat. But something just happens where he's an absolute in witness protection for 14 weeks out of the season. And then this 1 week, he'll bust out these huge plays. And people will be like, Darius Slayton's back. And then he's gone again to just not be seen. And that's why, despite Nabers being out and that wide receiver 1 spot being wide open for the taking, that true number 1 X wide receiver spot wide open for the taking, he only had 37 catches for 538 yards and 1 touchdown. He was 90th of 98 receivers versus man coverage, 72nd against zone. Absolutely horrific. And that's why he comes in with a 70 grade, and it does drag down this group. It does give me a heck of a lot less confidence in this group than if Malik Nabers isn't playing. And that's why, despite the fact that the guy hasn't played in a long time, he gets the same grade as Odell Beckham Jr. And I think that there's a huge competition with Malachi Fields coming over in the draft, where he could be a guy who I'd almost prefer him to start over Darius Slayton, because we kind of know what Darius Slayton is at this point, and that's a giant disappointment. So maybe Malachi Fields comes in, he gets some development, he gets some chemistry out there, and then Nabers comes back healthy, playing on the other outside, and you got a nice little 1-2 punch on the outside, and then you just got to fill in the gaps with who's going to be your slot guy. Is it going to be Calvin Austin, that smaller, speedy gadget type guy? Or are you going to go a little bit bigger with Isaiah Likely, which I think is the more likely of outcomes, as last year he took 73% of his snaps from the slot. So barely a tight end, as only 14.5% of his snaps came from a traditional inline tight end spot last season. Now you obviously got Mark Andrews there, but it's very possible we see a lot of the same from him this year, with Theo Johnson playing the role of Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely being that bigger slot guy. Now, Travis Kelce had a lot of success with this Kansas City offense style that Matt Nagy took from Andy Reid and all that had Travis Kelce really enter the stratosphere in terms of tight end production. There's a potential that could be very similar to here. Like, he only had 27 catches, 307 yards last year. That's going to go way up, because most of his production came early in the year, and then he kind of just disappeared. Now, only John Harbaugh out of all this group would really have the answer why, but he was somebody that John Harbaugh really wanted. So I think that says a lot about what he's potentially going to be here. He was 13th in drops percentage out of 47 tight ends, 9th in contested catch percentage. So sure-handed guy, can catch in traffic. That's what you want. Jaxson Dart is not afraid to put it into those windows, those tight windows in the red zone, and to get a sure-handed guy like Likely out there, perfect. He did only have 307 yards and 1 touchdown. He was literally a toenail away from 2 touchdowns, but it is what it is. The rules are the rules. I would just like to see how he's going to get used in this offense when they want to play a little bit bigger and he's out there and running a less traditional 2 tight end set, how that all works out, because as a blocker, he's never really been expected to do a whole lot and never has done a whole lot. And I don't know that Theo Johnson comes in as the best blocker either. So if Likely's going to be just solely a slot receiver lining up as a giant slot, it could affect the offense's overall explosiveness, because you want to have a speedier guy out there. And I think that if they're going to play that large, they're going to be a little bit slower than most, which is going to force Dart, who does play fast, to have to slow down his game as well. And I think that could work to their detriment. I do think that bringing in Isaiah Likely was a bit of an overpay, but they just wanted to get weapons out there. They wanted to get versatile weapons out there. So I understand the signing completely, wanting to get a guy with his versatility, who throughout his career has lined up much more as an inline tight end. I think you'll see that a lot more, hopefully, this season, because you're going to mix in there with Cam Skattebo, who is a great receiving threat out of the backfield. He did some really great things as a receiver out of the backfield last year. A really effective screen game. Has that patient running, but a physical runner as well out of the backfield. Can stay in and block. He's not afraid, again, to stick his nose or just his face mask in the grill of a defensive tackle. So having him back there in passing situations, having that versatility, is a really key component here. Tyrone Tracy is a more traditional wide receiving back, could also be a great contributor. We talked about Theo Johnson, who's definitely starting caliber, has great chemistry with Dart. He definitely will be a part of this offense this upcoming season. It really just lives or dies on Malik Nabers as to how highly graded this group can possibly be. So going back to Cam Skattebo, this running back room comes in 15th to 18th with Skattebo and Tyrone Tracy, 2 really good backs. Jaxson Dart, we'll talk about him, comes in as a tier 2 quarterback rushing threat. Not quite Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, but boy, was he looking like he was going to be there, and we'll see how he can build on that. You do worry again about the injuries and taking too many hits. Dude's got to learn how to slide. I know he's aggressive and competitive, but we need longevity out of you, pal. Devin Singletary, one of the better running back 3s in the league, sort of falls under the radar just, at this stage in his career. And I'm going to talk about Patrick Ricard real quick, coming over from Baltimore, the 300-plus pound fullback. Him and Cam Skattebo in the backfield together running the ball in short yardage situations, the type of physicality the Giants are going to be able to run with is going to be completely unmatched by any other team in the NFL. So from a short yardage perspective, lining up under center, running that I formation, the Giants might be the most physical and dangerous and scary team in that formation, in that situation this season because of the people in play here. And Cam Skattebo, coming off of that ankle injury, that brutal ankle injury, there was a lot of concern about, man, that's a bad injury. And then like 2 weeks ago, I saw him doing a freaking backflip like it was nothing, doing his touchdown celebration dance. So I think the ankle is okay, guys. I think he's just crazy enough to be completely 100% despite that brutal injury. I mean, when he got the injury, the first thing he did was, here, help me up. Like, the guy eats, I understand the guy eats crayons for breakfast, but he's an absolute animal. He's the perfect type of running back for this offense, just a complete psychopath with no regard for his health. You know, it's just like, I play physical football, I go to the wall, I run through wall, and I score a touchdown. And I do backflip, and I do dance, and I shake my head. That is Cam Skattebo. An absolute buffoon, but a lovable, like, Bobby Boucher type physical player. Like, he had 4.1 yards a carry. He probably could have had more if he wasn't so inviting of physical contact. Now, he's not going to blow you away with his speed or his agility or anything, despite the ability to do a backflip. You know, he only had 4 explosive runs last year. I don't think he had any runs over 20 yards. He had 27 first downs. He forced 22 missed tackles, which for a guy who only had 100 carries last year, what? And trust me, he wasn't getting those missed tackles by doing spin moves and jukes and leaping over the guys. He was doing that by putting his shoulder into their chest and sending them backwards. You know, go back to the Philadelphia Eagles game on Thursday Night Football for a perfect example of that. People could not bring him down because he doesn't stop. And in an era of running backs where everyone is almost going out of their way to avoid physical contact, it has trained a generation of defensive backs and linebackers to expect that. So they kind of get caught flat-footed a lot with a guy like Skattebo because they're not really anticipating a lot of athleticism and a lot of agility and a lot of shiftiness. But they're also kind of got the muscle memory of, there's no way this guy's just running right into me. And then when he does, it's like, holy crap, and he's falling forward. And even if he gets touched in the backfield, he's falling forward. You never see Cam Skattebo fall backward. And if you do, it's incredibly rare. And it's usually because about 8 guys have jumped on the pile and have now pushed him back. And there's only so much the man can do. So a fun option. It's great to see that he's going to be 100% to start the year. Him and Dart working those RPOs is going to be incredibly dynamic for this offense. And his physicality, again, with Patrick Ricard, going to be super fun to witness. And then, of course, you got Tyrone Tracy, a great number 2 back. Got some versatility in him. Going to be more of a speedy guy. You see him break out into gaps a lot more. He's a lot faster into the hole than Skattebo. A lot shiftier. So he does bring a nice little change of pace. And is a really good number 2 option. A great receiving threat, converted wide receiver. It's just an overall really good group. You know, it just lacks that, like we talked about with Skattebo, it just lacks that what we talked about previously with Bijan Robinson, for example, where you have that like high-end speed and you have that high-end receiving ability. This is like a decent ceiling, high floor running back situation where you get versatility, you get dynamicness, you get high levels of physicality, but you don't get like game-breaking ability. This is built for a team that wants to stay on the field, control the clock, control the pace of the game, and control the narrative overall of a game, which is right up John Harbaugh's alley. So this really does work, and this is the identity of this team. There are so many teams out there that don't have an identity. The Giants' identity is these three guys right here in this aspect of the game. The running game, the running backs, this type of swagger, this type of physical play that you're going to see from all three of these players. Now we go to the offensive line, and they come in 8th to 12th in pass blocking, 20th to 26th in run blocking. There's some really good players on this offensive line. There's some good depth pieces, some interesting decisions made, but it all really starts with Andrew Thomas. One of the best, if not the best when healthy, left tackles in football. The only thing hanging over this guy's head is the reliability to stay healthy. And because the injuries have haunted him for a lot of his pro career. Last year when he was playing, he was second in pressures allowed just 1 sack, first in quarterback hurries allowed, 11th in quarterback hits allowed. He was 5th out of 54 tackles in terms of zone blocking grade, 16th out of 54 in gap blocking grade. He was 5th in penalties out of 62. He was unbelievable when he was on the field. He just is incredible. He just needs to stay healthy because he really does have it all. He works incredibly well against finesse and power. He doesn't allow himself to get bull rushed. His hands are never out of place. His feet are always great. He's always in the perfect position to make it happen. He is the quintessential plug, play, and forget about tackle that teams love. Andrew Thomas, Jordan Mailata, Tristan Wirfs, those types of guys all fall into this category. There is a lot around, though, the health aspect, and that makes it where you're kind of nervous about if he goes out, it does significantly change your offensive line's ability. When he wasn't in, the Giants' offensive line has looked different over the years when he hasn't played. And when he plays, it's like he cauterizes the entire group of 5 so incredibly well. He's so good. He's so incredibly good. You want to see, you can put him up against anybody. He's had great games against the best in the business. He's rarely on the losing end of any pass snap rep. It's just phenomenal to watch. Then what you got next to him is you got John Runyon Jr., who came over from Green Bay, was expected to be pretty good, and has just kind of been like a low-end starting caliber, very replaceable. And he's in as open of a competition for that guard spot as I think that there is. It's a 5-man competition, potentially a 6-man competition for that left guard spot, including him and all those depth pieces that you're looking at here. Because I think all 4 of the other spots in the offensive line are pretty locked up. You got J.C. Davis, the rookie, who I was so high on. He was my number 5 tackle of all the tackles in this last class. He comes in, maybe long-term right tackle as Jermaine Illuminor gets older. But I would love to see him try to get some reps during the summer at guard, and maybe that works out for them and he can get on the field. There's Marcus Bowe, who's sort of been a swing offensive lineman throughout his rookie season. They brought in Daniel Falele from Baltimore, who is fine. He kind of is what he is. I don't know if there's a whole lot more upside in him. I think he's pretty much peaked at what his grades are here. But I think he's used to being a guard with a quarterback who's unpredictable standing behind him, and he kind of understands what Harbaugh wants out of an offense and wants out of the production and wants out of the physicality aspect, and that's important to have guys who can enforce that culture building from a roster perspective, from a player-to-player perspective. They got Lucas Patrick, who can be, any of these interior offensive linemen, swing offensive linemen. And then there's Evan Neal, who is on a $0 guaranteed contract, who, as a pass blocker, I don't know if there's been any worse at his worst. He's as bad as there's ever been in the history of football. He is Pop Warner bad sometimes. Stiff feet, stiff hips, no hand placement, nothing. In the run game, his physical stature really plays a part in there, and he used it incredibly well when given opportunities to play just 2 years ago. Did incredibly well as a run blocker. So there is maybe something there to get unlocked here with Matt Nagy. But if he can't win the starting job from Jon Runyan here, then I do expect him to maybe get cut before the beginning of the regular season. Moving on to the center, we got John Michael Schmitz, who I think people expected him to be Creed Humphrey by now, but he's sort of just become this, decent starting caliber center. Like, he's fine. He's fine. He ain't going to wow you with a whole lot. He's a good athlete, going to be really good in the run game. He was 15th to 31 in zone, 19th to 31 in gap, right smack dab in the middle of all the centers in the league. 9th in pressures allowed, 14th in hurries, 3rd in quarterback hits. Doesn't wow you in pass pro, but doesn't really make mistakes all that often either. And now he's going to get a full season back as a starter after some injuries last year. And this is a very center-friendly offense and culture that Harbaugh likes to run. Tyler Linderbaum, who, not the greatest pass protector, but a tremendous run blocker, kind of like what you get from John Michael Schmitz, really thrived under Harbaugh's leadership in Baltimore. So maybe you can expect sort of the same amount here, because Harbaugh really does focus on the offense and defensive lines and how they develop and how they play and the styles that they're putting out there. So that can really help Schmitz develop into who I think Giants fans really want him to be by now, which is like a top 5 center, which there was so much hype around him coming out of the draft. I think maybe people got ahead of themselves and not letting him develop. And now he's get another style of offense. We'll see how he integrates into that. And then there's the right guard right now, who perhaps long-term is the right tackle. Who knows? The number 10 overall pick, the guy you traded Dexter Lawrence for, is Francis Mauigoa from the University of Miami. Who comes in, I think he's going to be a great pass blocker, and the run blocking I think will need some work at the pro level, especially moving from tackle to guard. His grades did get bumped a little bit downward from that position conversion, because he was 13th out of 108 tackles in terms of pressures allowed, 7th in hurries, 58th in quarterback hits. He was 10th in zone and 4th in gap for run blocking grades. But again, that's from the tackle spot, so now you're kicking into the guard, so it's a little bit different here. We'll see how he reacts to that, how he adjusts his game playing against more defensive tackles and those bigger bodies than he did playing against smaller defensive ends and outside linebackers. He was a little grabby, 85th out of 108 in penalties. So we'll see how this works out. I think that it's a safe thing to pick him up, and I think he's going to be a good player. His floor I think is a decent starter, and I think his ceiling is like a top all-pro lineman. So I think you drafted a high floor, and I think that's important, at least for these early years, and just improving this offensive line and worried about protecting Jaxson Dart so he gets the great pass blocking. I think that was a priority with this draft pick as well. And just getting a guy who you felt maybe had some versatility to kick inside, because you do have Jermaine Illuminor still, who was, in terms of pass pro, one of the better right tackles in the league last year. Him and Andrew Thomas have been really good combinations in pass pro together. The run blocking is just a bit right? Like, he's probably one of the worst. Him and Jon Runyan competing for the worst run blocker on the team, the starting 5 at least. But a really good pass protector, going to get that front side protection done really well for Jaxson Dart. who's going to want to roll out to that front side, to that right side, and how Illuminor gets himself in position, understanding that Dart wants to maybe break the pocket, understanding where Dart's going to be, where Dart's going to want to roll to, where he's going to want to step up. Illuminor did really well at that, and I expect that to continue. He's also got, again, great leadership qualities. There's a lot of great leadership across this entire Giants roster with guys really stepping up. So overall, I think you should be happy with this offensive line. You're going to get a top 15 offensive line out of this, I believe. Even at their lowest point for each grade, 12 pass blocking, 26 run blocking, I think you can still average that out to being about top 15 in the league. And if you get some really good development early from Francis Mauigoa, if you figure out that left guard spot and get some really good play, you could have theoretically a top 10 offensive line here. So it's Jaxson Dart just needs to trust them, I think, a little bit more and not hang on to the ball so long and trust his eyes a little bit and let these guys do their work and not just start running around and allowing pressure that doesn't need to be there, because this group is very capable of keeping you nice and clean every single play. So overall, it is my 19th ranked offense, a tier 3 coaching staff, 17th pass offense, 16th rush offense. You need a little bit more in terms of like high-end playmakers. Like those home run threats are what is lacking in this offense. But they do have an offense that is very capable of moving the ball, very capable of controlling the clock, and very capable of shortening games to their advantage. Now let's move over to the defensive side of the ball, where they got a lot of fun pieces, losing Dexter Lawrence, but now this front four, this defensive line, is starting to shape up with some of the depth pieces that they added. And this really is the fanciest group of them all. It is the defense, is this pass rush, this defensive line with a variety of different guys out here. The pass rush comes in 19th to 21st, run defense is 11th to 14th. Losing Dexter Lawrence did drop them down. It did very much eliminate the interior defensive line pass rush, that pocket collapsing interior rush, where now it's really kind of absent. You got DJ Reader in there, who's fine. You got Shelby Harris, who's just mostly a run stuffer. So from a run defense perspective on the interior, they're pretty much set with Reader and Harris. You can even throw in Roy Robertson Harris when he's healthy, rookie Bobby, Jamison Travis as well. But when you look at their pass rush ability, when DJ Reader is your best pass rusher on the interior, that's just not great. So it's mostly going to be defensive interior by committee, I think, here. You're hoping Darius Alexander can develop in a significant way and get himself up to like that starting caliber, at least pass rushing interior defensive player, to just counteract what you have here. Because what you have off the edges is just phenomenal. I got Arvell Reese listed here as well. He's going to be listed in the linebacker spot as well coming up. But he gets a 75 pass rush, a 75 run defense. Just a nice balance to his game off the edge. We'll see how he fits in overall. I think most of what he's going to do as a pass rusher is going to be from a traditional linebacker spot anyway, at least in this season, as they figure out what they're doing with the other guys. Obviously, Brian Burns completely locked in as the number one pass rusher on this team. Doesn't bring you a whole lot in run defense, so I think with all the bodies that they have, I think we're going to see Brian Burns, around that 700 snap, that 700 snap range, 700 to 750 snaps. Not going to overuse him. Going to put him out there where he can really just pin his ears back and get after the quarterback, because you do have better run defenders available in your edge room. Though I do think of everyone, he will get the most snaps overall. I mean, because last year, 5th in total snaps. Now, there was a lot of him, eating other people's cooking, we'll call it, because he was 21st in pressures, 58th in pass rush win percentage at a 63, and 49th in hurries at a 63. That, to me, is somebody who when he was winning, he was finishing, but he wasn't winning all that often. Now, is a lot of that double teams? Yes. Is a lot of that just, them getting the ball out quick because the defensive backs were not playing all that well? Sure. But I think Brian Burns does need to turn up the aggression and the win percentage. He needs to win more often. He's given a lot of opportunities and he wasn't really executing them. He was doing great with cleanup duty on about half the sacks, but he was still creating. He was still somebody the defense was going away from. So that is significant, and that isn't something that shows up on the stat sheet. He was great with the batted balls. He wasn't taking penalties. He was middle of the pack in missed tackle percentage, so he was fine with that. It's just there is the concern of, if that's going to be his win percentage and that's going to be his hurry percentage, how often is he be able to convert that into sacks as often as he did this year? It's just not a sustainable, talking about this with other guys before, it's just not a sustainable way of going about things. But he does bring like a freaky athleticism. When he does win, he wins so impressively that it is undeniable that he is one of the great players at the edge position in terms of pass rush. Now, again, keeping him fresh, I think, is going to be super important, and that's why you wonder what they're doing with Kayvon Thibodeau, who's a great run defender, probably the best run defending edge on the team, one of the better at run defending edges in the league, and a great pass rusher when he is focused. But he does lack a significant amount of consistency that Abdul Carter showed the exact opposite for. Where Abdul Carter came in with only credited with 5 sacks, got most of them at the end of the year. And people were really calling him a bust. Now he does, needs to put the Twitter fingers away, because I understand some things are bigger than football, but when you do that, you talk yourself into a corner where Josh Jacobs and James Pierce Jr. and Jonathan Cooper happen and you're dead silent, and that makes you look bad. That's more of a locker room distraction than introducing the president, for example. It certainly doesn't help with the online discourse. But he did really, really well outside of actually finishing the sacks. Like, he was 11th in pressures. He was 5th in quarterback hits, 11th in quarterback hurries. He was 22nd in pass rush win percentage. So he was out there. He was making things work. 11th in forced fumbles. He was making stuff work out there. He just wasn't finishing. And that will come if this type of production in terms of pressures and win percentage and hits and hurries, if that all continues in that range, then you are going to see him get to that double-digit sacks, and you're going to see him get there in some key situations. And he was setting up Brian Burns for success a lot. He was setting up Kayvon Thibodeau for success a lot. You just need him to be a finisher. He just needs to win just slightly faster. He does need to get to the quarterback just slightly quicker. And I think that his versatility in him now with Arvell Reese coming in, I think Arvell Reese now slides into that role that Carter was playing early in the season, where Carter was actually getting starts as an off-ball inside linebacker. Now that spot is filled with Arvell Reese. So now Carter can just focus on being a straight-up edge rusher. We saw this happen with Micah Parsons, who Abdul Carter drew a lot of comparisons to when he was coming out of Penn State, is that he's that off-ball linebacker converted to edge, probably going to be an edge for most of his pro career, but does have the off-ball capabilities. And there's that temptation to use Parsons as an off-ball backer from Dallas early on in his rookie season. And inevitably, he just became a straight-up pass rusher when they filled that void with others. And now that void is filled with a very similar player, it now allows Abdul Carter to just be a flat-out edge guy. And I think that's going to be incredibly advantageous for his career as well, because now going against the tackles, he has some pass rush opportunities where he's lining up against guards and he's catching double teams And now just working off the one side, which is I think going to be mostly what he does, I think we're going to see a lot more of the sexy stats pop for him this upcoming season. Again, you mix in Kayvon Thibodeau there. I think Kayvon Thibodeau is going to be that early downs guy. I think there's a world where you get Kayvon Thibodeau and you get Arvell Reese as your edges while Carter and Burns are off the field. I think you're always probably 90% of the time going to have at least one of Abdul Carter or Brian Burns on the field at all times. And then with the mix of Thibodeau and Arvell Reese, even Chauncey Golston, who goes really under the radar, kind of forgotten about. But he's a really good depth piece as well, especially in being in the position he's in, which is like an edge 5, edge 4.5, I guess, depending on how you view Arvell Reese as an edge player. So overall, there is potential here, but for the pass rush specifically, they need that interior defensive line, like I said, to show up. They need to help out. They can't just be a weak interior pass rush where they can go one-on-one and then these other guys on the edges catch all the double teams. Then you're done at that point. So someone on the interior needs to break out to help out this plethora of weaponry that they have coming off the edge. Now these linebackers, I got Arvell Reese here now as a starting linebacker. He is listed as a starting inside linebacker with Tremaine Edmonds. They're 23rd to 26th in coverage, 10th to 11th in run defense. And that's where this linebacking group really lives. And that's what is so key about having a great linebacking group is be relatively serviceable in coverage, but be really great in run defense. Because your defensive backs, your safeties will handle the coverage. Just don't be a complete liability in coverage over the middle of the field. And with Tremaine Edmonds coming over from Chicago, this guy was the reason why they didn't draft Sonny Styles, because they got veteran Sonny Styles. Now last year in Chicago, it was fine. He had 85 tackles, 29 assists. He was 31st in completion percentage allowed 475 yards on 51 catches. He was 9th in quarterback rating allowed, so that's really good. Being top 10 in that is good. 15th in man coverage of 52, 24th in zone. You guys know me, I love my linebackers to be better in zone than man, but if being ranked in those areas in both, it shows versatility. He allowed 3 touchdowns. He did have 4 interceptions, so he was turning over the ball, and that's a huge feature to have as well. When you have a great athlete like that who's capable of turning over the ball, getting an extra possession for the offense, that's really what you're looking for. And he was 29th of 59 in pass breakups, so right in the middle. A lot of what he did was like in the middle or in the upper quarter of the league. So that's a good sign. He's at this stage in his career, great athlete, high floor, low ceiling. He's going to give you he'll be the 10th to 15th best inside linebacker in the league all year. And that's really what I think you want. Just get some control on the defense and some consistency as well. And then you just get the freak anomaly in Arvell Reese, who frankly, I wasn't even that high on. I wasn't really that high on him coming out of the process. He wasn't graded all that high for me as an edge player. I expected him to be a edge player coming into the league, and the Giants were really the only team I could think of that would pick him and not make him a complete edge player and actually make him an inside linebacker, and that's the team he ended up on. So for me, it's okay, he did fine. He was 6th in missed tackles percentage. But in terms of coverage, he was absolutely horrible. He was 95th in completion percentage allowed, 68th in passer rating allowed, 55th in man coverage, 43rd in zone coverage. And that's in college, right? What do you do when you come to the NFL and everyone's good? So I don't know how long this linebacker thing's going to last. And then you look at it and you go, okay, so does he just become a full-time edge? now what do you do with all the other bodies you got? Like, because now he's completely redundant with Abdul Carter to a large degree. So I just want to see him like really work on that traditional off-ball inside linebacker skill set throughout the spring and the summer and through training camp and in the preseason, because that's where he really needs to get to for this pick to not be a complete bust. And I understand that people are like, oh man, it doesn't matter, just great player. And yeah, the positionless defense type of a strategy that Denard Wilson likes to do does play into the wheelhouse of the personnel that they have here in this front seven in particular. But at some point, you need to have like a traditional linebacker, two traditional linebackers on the field to stop the run. You got to have traditional interior defensive linemen. You got to have good disciplined edge setters outside the tackles. And you got to find a role for Arvell Reese, who's a top 5 pick. You have a top 5 pick in Arvell Reese. You have a top 3 pick in Abdul Carter. And you got a great Brian Burns. You know, I guess Kayvon Thibodeau is the odd one out here. At some point, I guess I would expect him to be gone before the beginning of the season, you would think. But it all depends on what Arvell Reese produces in terms of an off-ball linebacker and what, in turn, you then have to do if the off-ball backer stuff doesn't quite work out. Because you do have Micah McFadden, who, when he's not injured, is quite serviceable as a number 2 linebacker. It's just the injuries have started to pile up with him, which is unfortunate because he was sort of trending towards being like, oh, this guy could be a number 1 linebacker. And then the trending with injuries and all that kind of put the kibosh on that. You got Darius Muasau, who's sort of more of an athletic profile. And Jack Kelly, who I predicted in a 7-round mock would go to the Giants in almost the exact spot he went to. It was my greatest prediction. My most accurate prediction. How do you get a day 3 prediction like that? I am a genius. He's sort of filling the role in there as well. And I think all of these guys will be kept just because of Arvell Reese's versatility of being an edge player / linebacker. They'll want to have them keep these more traditional linebackers on the roster to sort of maintain in the event that Arvell Reese does need to go to a full-time edge. Now with the defensive backs, and it's a hot and cold group, but they're 25th to 29th in coverage with a tier 4 run protection. It's a lot of corner 2s and safety 2s and underperformance and oh my God, is this all going to go wrong? It starts with Paulson Adebo, who came in. I was like, I guess he's not quite a number 1 guy for me. You still need a number 1 guy. They brought him in as a number 1 guy. It looks like he's staying as the number 1 guy. 52nd in completion percentage allowed. 44th in forced incompletion percentage. He only allowed 2 touchdowns. That's a good thing. Had 1 interception, 5 pass breakups, only 3 penalties. Smack dab in the middle, 38th out of 74 for passer rating allowed. Oh, excuse me. Cornerback snaps, he had 664. No snaps from the slot, really. So he's pure outside corner. They did play better with him out there as opposed to when he was hurt and not out there. But he still is just not a number 1 corner. I'm much more comfortable with Paulson Adebo as my cornerback 2. And the unfortunate nature of it is that they kind of just brought in terms of like Greg Newsome, a guy very similar to him, in terms like he's just a cornerback 2. We'll get to Colton Hood in a little bit, but then you have Drew Phillips, who is your slot guy. And talk about a impossible guy to predict. Drew Phillips is the most boom or bust player every single snap that you could get on this defense. He's either producing at such a high level, right? Where it's like Man, that was a great rep. He was 7th out of 74 in man coverage grades, 36th in zone. But he was the 27th best slot corner in terms of overall production. He took 10 penalties. 76 targets, 56 catches, 69th in completion percentage allowed. So he was a sticky player, but the guy was either catching it to make a play on it, or he was taking a penalty, or it was a big play by him. There wasn't a whole lot of these that was a decent rep from Drew Phillips. No, it was that was great or that sucked. He only allowed 3 touchdowns. He had 2 interceptions, but then he had 8 pass breakups, and that goes back again to what I was saying. It's either a great rep or a crap rep. So you want to see how he gets molded into being a more consistent corner, and having a coach like Denard Wilson as a defensive coordinator definitely works in that favor. A guy who understands defensive backs, who's going to put him in positions to succeed throughout the season. And then there's Colton Hood, who, from an outside corner perspective, to me, he's the best outside corner they got on the team. Where, he stepped up big when Jermod McCoy was out for the Volunteers last year. He only allowed a single touchdown, only took 4 penalties. He was 36th of 134 in passer rating allowed. He was 21st out of 134 in man coverage. So he can play that press man on the outside. He doesn't have great run defense abilities. But in press man, he's actually can play a pretty good press man coverage on the outside. And I think it's only a matter of time before he finds his way into the starting lineup, opposite of probably Paulson Adebo, while Greg Newsome sort of takes over that third outside, that swing outside corner, coming in dime packages and whatnot. It's only a matter of time, because he showed that he could step up and cover the best player on the other team, run with him, and that wouldn't be the expectation for him on this team. I think that just the way the defensive back structure is set up here, it would be one guy plays on one side of the field, the other guy plays on the other, and that's that. And I'm confident that Colton Hood and Paulson Adebo as a 1-2 punch could do that. Just a matter of when they feel Colton Hood is ready to get out there. I'd put him out right away. The depth at corner after that, though, you got Corey Black, who is just replacement level, and then Deonte Banks, who I gave a 64 cover grade to. An absolute bum, and I don't say that lightly. He's a bum. His rookie year, it was wow, he's going to be really good. And he's been easily the worst cornerback in the entire league since then. It's not even close. It's not even close. He has no ability to locate the football when it's in the air. He has no ability to play in man coverage without taking a penalty. He cannot stay with a receiver. He cannot break up a pass. He cannot force a turnover. What he's turned into is the only thing he's good at now is being a kick returner, which I guess is a fine role for him moving forward, but we used a first-round pick on him when we could have taken Joey Porter, who last year was one of the best corners in the league. So, did I call it? Yes. I wanted Joey Porter Jr., not Deonte Banks. People tried to convince me Deonte Banks was going to be good. They're like, oh, no, he's going to be great in press man and blah, 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 Wink Martindale. And I'm like, Wink Martindale's not going to stick around long enough for this to matter. And he didn't. So to me, this is a waste of a roster spot, but whatever. He's on a rookie deal. Just keep him, I guess. Let him return kicks. Just keep him away from the defensive side of the ball, from the actual defense. We got enough other bodies out there. We don't need them. Now, going on to the safety group, I expect there to be some 3 safety sets here as well. Mixing in our Darius Washington, who's probably the best cover safety, but currently listed as number 3 because I think the run defending and the size and the injury concerns come into play there. Jason Pinnock, a fun little signing, bringing him back. But it's Javon Holland and Tyler Nubin. And people are going to be really high on Javon Holland, and I'm just not. He had one good year with the Dolphins, and I have not seen any semblance of like this top level safety since. He had 43 tackles. I mean, he was 7th in completion percentage allowed, 20th out of 66 in forced incompletions. He allowed 2 touchdowns, had 1 interception. He was 28th of 66 in pass breakups, 25th in passer rating allowed. So, like, he's not a top 10 safety. He's just not. And I've seen him get beaten coverage in some of the most horrific ways. You know, sometimes can track the ball well. Other times he couldn't track the ball if it was a slow-moving beach ball with a radar system on his head. He is the quintessential center field safety. Tyler Nubin's the one that moves around. So you just need to see better sideline to sideline speed, better anticipation on the back end. You know, understanding where he needs to help and where he doesn't. You know, making sure that he gives the blanket over the top on the right side of the field at the right time, steps up into the middle of the field at the right time. More confident with his eyes and his hands and breaking up passes and tracking, baiting the quarterback. You want to see him be better at that. That year at Miami, that second to last year in Miami, that's the Jevon Holland you're looking for. And is he in there? Was he ever in there? I don't know. He allowed 18 catches and 363 yards. So that's 20 yards a catch. 20 yards per reception allowed by Jevon Holland last year. Keep in mind, all the safeties that we've covered to date have always had less than 10 yards of reception. He's got 20 on his head. So that is not nothing. That's the sign of a guy who, deep down the field, just loses his ability to make a play. So that is a concern here. And we'll see how Denard Wilson works this out. Because for me, there's a huge potential that Tyler Nubin is just a better player overall. There is a possibility that ends up being the case by the end of the season. So we'll see how that works out and how they go about using these safeties that they brought in. But if you do have that Mike McDonald influence, then we will see the 3 safety set with Tyler Nubin probably filling into that quote-unquote Kyle Hamilton role in this defense, a much smaller version, but we'll see how they roll out the safety group in particular and who wins out that number 2 corner spot opposite of Paulson Adebo. Will it be Newsome? Will it be the rookie Hood? It better not be Deonte Banks. If it is, we're all in a lot of trouble. So overall, this defense comes in at 23rd overall, a tier 3 coaching defense like we discussed, 25th pass defense, 13th run defense. So they did a good job of replacing Dexter Lawrence up the middle. They filled the linebacking void pretty well, getting it some depth there to really assist with that run defense. The edge group is fine, a very versatile group, but they just lack that pass rush and that back end high ceiling coverage ability from the defensive back group to be ranked anything more than just 25th in pass defense, which does drag down the defensive grade overall. Now we take a look at the schedule here and there. Smack dab in the middle, 17th strength of schedule with a 4.98. And their Vegas over-under was 7.5 wins, and I actually have it as a push, as much as it pains me as a Giants fan here. There's really 5 games I look at where I'm like, these are wins, and they're all home games. It's Tennessee, Arizona, New Orleans, Washington, and then Cleveland there towards the end. There's 4 games where I look at and I go, there's no possible way they're winning this game. It's the Rams in week 2, the Eagles after the bye week on the road, San Francisco and Detroit on the road late in the season. But then there's that mixture of games, right? Like, you got Dallas twice. How do they match up against Dallas? Washington on the road, Houston on the road, the Colts on the road. Jacksonville, that's gonna be a tough one. What kind of team is Jacksonville gonna be? I have them as a push game at Seattle, just because Seattle along with Miami, are probably the only two teams in the league that didn't get better this past offseason. Now, I know it's like, oh, they were the defending champs. How could they get better? They had a lot of places they could have gotten better in, and they just didn't. And they lost their offensive coordinator. So, maybe Seattle, it's possible Seattle's not quite going to be that juggernaut team, at least on the offense side of the ball, that they were last year. And they're going to be just mostly a defensive-centric team that kind of falls back down to earth the way that we expected them to place last year. That'll be interesting to see what that game even looks like. And especially that late in the year, what that looks like. As you expect Nabers to be back by then, and them to be really settled into the offense with Nagy and Jaxson Dart. So that game could look a whole lot different than I think people are expecting as well. And we'll get to Seattle down the road, maybe sooner than people think in this power ranking series. But it's hard to say when you have all those games that are like they could go either way. There's a real world where they're all losses. Right? Like, who knows with Dallas? Who knows with the Colts? Jacksonville, Houston. Like, it's some volatile games here. So that's why they get the push. If you're just destined to pick them, maybe pick the over because of these volatile games. The amount of push games they have. If you think they can get 3 out of those, then by all means. So overall, they are my 19th ranked team, 10th head coach, 19th offense, and 23rd defense. A team on the come up, but maybe just not quite there. Need a couple more pieces, I would say. And there it is. My number 19 team, the New York Giants. Thank you for making it this far. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thumbs up the video. Helps out with the algorithms. I need the algorithmic help. It's a race to 1,000 subs. Hopefully I have them by the time you've seen this. Maybe I won't. Maybe I do. Maybe you can help with that. And I will see you guys with the next video next time.